but I want people to understand what has transpired here and the reason why I'll be bringing a lawsuit against the U.S. Marshals here and the reason why I'll be suing them. So I want to explain to you the reason why I'm going to file against the U.S. Marshals here in Las Vegas.
Oh, for f***'s sake, not that again.
Welcome to the Dummy Kruger channel, everyone. Today's video takes us outside a federal courthouse located in Las Vegas, Nevada, where we find everyone's favorite constitutional law scholar educating the masses about the importance of non-existing laws. Last month, I made a video of Chili exclaiming just how excited I was to have Fun Chili back on the prowl and doing what he does best, making an ass of himself. At that moment, I didn't have a clue just how right I would turn out to be. Fun Chili is currently suing members of the Las Vegas Police Department for what he says are rights violations, including torture, when an officer held onto his elbow for an extended period of time because Chili was acting as slippery as a Thai woman trying to escape a passport bro. Shout out Linda. Speaking of passport bros, DeCastro is also currently, quote, helping News Now Omaha sue that same police department for something. And that's where today's story picks up. Chili has been to this federal courthouse on a handful of occasions where he has been denied access for lack of identification, denied his constitutional God-given right to record in this building, and now he claims members of the U.S. Marshals are following him around while he attempts to file these lawsuits. This is where our education for the day begins.
So in 2020, after George Floyd was murdered in the streets of Minneapolis, what happened was, because of the 1994 crime bill, there's a specific part of the 1994 crime bill called Operation Relentless Pursuit. Operation Relentless Pursuit is when the federal government can decide, they can just decide that there's exigent circumstances in a particular state, and in this state it was New York after the George Floyd murder. And so they invoked the exigent circumstances clause, and then what that triggered was the 1994 crime bill's Operation Relentless Pursuit.
Well, Chili was only a quarter century off on his timeline of events here. First, Operation Relentless Pursuit was a controversial joint law enforcement initiative launched by the DOJ during the Trump administration in December of 2019. The operation aimed to combat violent crime in several cities across the United States that were experiencing high levels of violent crime rates. The initiative, at least when it was formed, had absolutely nothing to do with the protests and riots that began a full 5 months later in May of 2020. I'll give Chili partial credit here because he did accidentally stumble upon being somewhat right. The same operational tactics were used in cities like Minneapolis and Portland, where federal agents, a lot of times unidentified, began descending on these cities to assist in connection with local law enforcement when property began being destroyed. The fact that some of these law enforcement agencies had no identifying insignia was cause for alarm. More on that in a bit. Let's get back to Chili.
It gets even worse. So then the second time I came here, they then decided that they would follow me. So I was followed by the U.S. Marshals, and when I asked them their name and badge number, they refused to identify. In violation of H.R. 7711, the 2020 Badge Transparency Act. I explained to them that they're in violation of the 2020 Transparency Badge Act. So they passed H.R. 7711, called the Badge Transparency Act, stating that any federal officer has to have on his chest his name and his badge number. And H.R. 7711 clearly says the Badge Transparency Act. So what the result of that was the 2020 Badge Transparency Act passed by the 116th Congress, called H.R. 7711. This is a law, H.R. 7711. That would include U.S. Marshals, FBI, CIA, ICE, every single federal agency in the United States of America, when they are working, has to have their name and badge number on their chest, called the Badge Transparency Act, House Resolution Bill 7711. So when I came here, I explained to them, you're in violation of H.R. 7711. H.R. 7711 says that man has to have his name and badge number on his jacket. Why isn't it there? Well, H.R. 7711 says that these guys have to follow the rule of law as well. So all you marshals in there who said you watch my videos, what the hell's the matter with you? We have the rule of law in this country. It's your job to uphold the rule of law. When I got here, these jackboot thugs, none of them have names or badge numbers on. So I said to them, excuse me, you are a U.S. Marshal. You have to have your name and badge number on your chest. Here, your name and badge number has to go on your chest. Everybody can look it up. It's online. Everybody can read it.
Whew! HR 7711 sounds like a big deal. I think I will look it up. So the bill was introduced by Representative Ocasio-Cortez in July of 2020 after federal agencies were seen in major cities without any noticeable identifying markers. Generally, the purpose of the Badge Transparency Act was to increase transparency and accountability in law enforcement agencies. It aimed to address concerns regarding the misuse of authority by law enforcement officers and to try to build trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Now, I'm certainly not a 20-year constitutional law scholar like our stumpy little friend here, but I did watch How a Bill Becomes a Law by Schoolhouse Rock when I was a kid.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
Now, for a bill to grow up into a law like a big boy, it has to first pass through committee.
And I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait.
So HR 7711 was sent to the House Judiciary for review, where it died and never became a law. Chili, I've linked a YouTube Kids video on how a bill becomes a law below in the description. You can thank me later. You see, what I think Chili more than likely did was he noticed these marshals didn't have names or badge numbers attached to their uniforms, so he fired up the Bing machine. Chili just seems like he Bings things instead of Googles them, and noticed this bill from AOC and just ran with it before actually knowing anything about it, because constitutional law scholar. When he started getting blasted in the comments section, our journalist probably hit up Bing.com once again and updated the description in his video. It reads, HR 7711, the Badge Transparency Act of 2020, was the original legislation. It wasn't. It was not passed, and then it was tucked into the defense bill and therefore passed, not future or present. The Badge Transparency Act is law. Throughout the comment section of his video, he would continue trying to prove he wasn't wrong. He wrote, tucked inside the National Defense Authorization Act, which just became law, it didn't, that was 2 years ago, is a new requirement for federal military and civilian law enforcement personnel involved in the federal government's response to a, quote, civil disturbance to wear visible identification of themselves and the name of the government entity employing them. That's good news. Again, I'll give Chili partial credit here, or at least Bing partial credit, because on January 1st, 2021, over 2 years ago, this little snippet made its way into the over 1,400-page NDAA for fiscal year 2021. What it essentially did was add more language to Chapter 41, Title 10 of the U.S. Code. It reads, whenever a member of the armed forces, including the National Guard, or federal law enforcement personnel provide support to federal authorities to respond to a civil disturbance, each individual employed in the capacity of providing such support shall visibly display 1. The individual's name or other individual identifier that is unique to the individual, 2. The name of the armed force, federal entity, or other organization by which such individual is employed. There are exceptions like if you do not wear a uniform or other distinguishing clothing or equipment in the regular performance of their official duties, or 2. Are engaged in undercover operations in the regular performance of their official duties. So why was this put in the NDAA? Well, there was a lot of confusion going on at the time who some of these officials represented. Were they actually with the federal government? It turns out, yes, they were, but I can understand the uneasiness of having a group of people that claim that they are there to enforce the law without even knowing the agency they are with. What this all has to do with Chili's contention that now all members are now required to wear names and badge numbers on their chest at all times? Well, nothing at all. The people Chili have been interacting with at this courthouse are simply security for this federal building. They were not there to provide support to federal authorities to respond to civil disturbances. Walking into a federal building and acting like a moron isn't a civil disturbance. A civil annoyance, maybe, but Chili does lots of annoying things. There's never been a need to call the National Guard in. And to get rid of them, all one really needs to do is set up a sanctioned MMA fight, and you'll never see him in your area again. Shout out Captain Goo. He finished up his live stream with multiple rants about the fact that we all need to live by the rule of law, which I agree with.
but these guys don't have to follow the basic rule of law that says they have to have a badge and name on their shirt? What's the deal here? What's the deal? Is there a rule of law in our country or not? Either these guys have to follow the rule of law, or there's no rule of law. There is the rule of law in this country. Either we have a rule of law that the government has to follow. What are the 4 principles of the rule of law? First principle, that government and its agents are also accountable to the rule of law. That's what this entire channel is about, the rule of law. He has to follow the rule of law. We all have to follow the rule of law. Either we live by a rule of law or we do not. Which is it? Which is it? I'm just dying to know. I'm just dying to know. The U.S. Marshal said, you guys watch my channel. Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now? That's what I'm talking about. You guys go by DeleteLawz.com, get your indestructible trifold or your digital trifold. Have it with you always at all times. Apparently, there's no rule of law in our country if you're a U.S. Marshal. If you're a U.S. Marshal, then you don't have to follow H.R. 7711. It doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to you. You're a U.S. Marshal.
It's really hard to take this man-child seriously ranting about the rule of law when he doesn't hold himself to the same standards, even though we have yet to implement his style of policing.
In a world that didn't have the terms law enforcer or police or cop, imagine a world that the way you identified what authority was by what they were wearing on their head. And just imagine for just a moment, if you could just imagine that behind these lenses, there was cameras that went out in 6 different directions.
Where he claims that people will go willingly with law enforcement as long as they are being filmed by daddy government.
Under his eye. Under his eye.
His actions continue to defy his own logic. Not only has he had multiple failure to appears throughout his life, he's currently running away from one warrant stemming from his arrest in Ironton, Ohio. He also has a warrant out of Oregon, Ohio for telecommunications harassment. It's too bad law enforcement didn't have 6 cameras mounted upon their heads. This is a major problem I see with these, quote, activists that try to twist narratives to fit their agendas. Not only does he make up non-existing laws out of the blue just to scream like a maniac into his phone while claiming these security officials are doing something nefarious, he also screams incessantly about the rule of law, which he himself fails to live by. Okay guys, before I let Chili take us out today, please remember to subscribe, notify, like, and comment below. Take it away, Nutella.
I went to file a complaint at the marshal's office and I got the supervisor. So then I said to the supervisor, what's your name and badge number? And he said, I'm not going to give it to you.
Reach up high, yeah, yeah. Now put your hands